Good morning, everybody. So glad to be back with y'all this morning. I hope you're having a great day. Sounds like we've had a lot of big discussions at WIG this morning with all that's going on with the city of Rocky Mount. And so we're going to shift gears a little bit. We have Angie Lewis back with us today.
Good morning.
If y'all remember, you were here with us 2 or 3 months ago. Is that right? To talk about rates. And Angie is a great lender that Trevor and I often use here in Rocky Mount, specifically with a mortgage company called Lower. And she is licensed in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. But tell us how long you've been doing this.
So I've been in the mortgage business since 2002. I live in Edgecombe County, so local girl. I have an office here in Rocky Mount.
I remember you lived in Edgecombe County.
Yeah,
me too.
I'm an Edgecombe County girl, born and raised. Went to school, moved away for a little bit, but eventually came back here and have an office in Rocky Mount near the Harris Teeter. So right here around the corner.
Oh my goodness, and Angie, we've been working together since I got my license in 2009. And I remember you coming to our office. Ken Warfield just loved you, adored you, and you were at BB&T back then, and you were just so knowledgeable even back then. And
she's like a researcher, though. Don't you feel like she's a researcher, so she would be knowledgeable?
Yes.
Would you say that about yourself, or you just said, I think you're a researcher?
Well, you have to be a researcher because there are a lot of different guidelines in the mortgage world, so you've got to really dig in and kind of find all the ins and outs of things that work.
True that.
And working with someone local like this is so important because there's so much to it. And there's a lot of online, lenders out there you can click on easy and get, pre-qualified somewhere. But working with local is so, you end up getting better service, of course, better rates a lot of times, the whole package. So
it sure is nice for the attorney's office to work with someone they know and trust. All right, so the real reason we have Angie back today is Trevor and I discussed there's a lot in the news right now about interest rates. So, and we've seen great news about interest rate because they have been going down, but we wanted to dig into this a little bit more because this is a popular time of year before the holidays when people really are looking to buy or sell a home. So, Angie, talk to us about what the interest rates cut means.
So there's a lot of information in the news about the Fed and the Fed cutting rates, and so we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about that and what that actually means for mortgage rates. So when the Fed cuts rates, which you're hearing on the news, they recently did a 1/4 point cut. The world thinks that mortgage rates also went down 1/4%. The Fed indirectly impacts mortgage rates, but they do not directly impact mortgage rates. So what happens in the mortgage world, we're heavily influenced by inflation, job reports, things that are going on in the economy, typically the 10-year Treasury, not necessarily the Fed. So the Fed rate is a short-term lending rate, and when they do make those cuts, it does benefit you as a consumer because it typically can make your credit card rates lower, it can influence car loan rates, home equity lines if you use those kind of services. So definitely a benefit when the Fed cuts rates, but most of the time the mortgage rates have already digested that potential rate cut and moved ahead of the Fed. And in fact, when the Fed cut the rates the other day, mortgage rates technically actually went up a little bit. So it's not always a direct impact, but definitely influences mortgage rates, and we have seen those trend down still as probably the lowest they've been in the last 11 months or so.
And how often does the Fed adjust the rates?
It really depends. It depends on what's going on in the market and what's happening. Again, back to kind of economics and reports that are out there and how strong things are with jobs and spending and consumer confidence. But they meet mostly monthly, but that does not always mean that there's going to be a Fed cut. So the September Fed cut was the first cut in quite some time. There are expected to be potentially 2 more Fed cuts this year, depending on, again, all the reports that come out. That's not a guarantee, but we're anticipating that, and so hopefully we're going to see gradual decline in mortgage rates.
And so we talked about just before the show, a decrease in rates is often really good for one, but it's as a result of something else happening in the market. So you want to dig into that a little bit more?
Yeah, so if you think back to COVID, I call those COVID rates or pandemic rates. They were really kind of artificially kept low to help the world continue to function. So a 3% rate is really probably not realistic. I don't know that we'll ever see that again. We may see it again. If we do, that means we probably have bigger problems to worry about. So what's happening with mortgage rates and the Fed, when they are cutting rates, typically it's because of things like weakening job reports. So our neighbor might be losing their job. It's about inflation cooling off, which means people are spending less money, and they might be spending less money because they're worried about their future and what's going to happen in their job safety. So sometimes rates are getting better at the expense of something else getting worse.
Right, right.
That's interesting, perspective. And how do we, when is that announced, when the actual mortgage rates go down? I mean, that sounds like a dumb question, but like, how do we know?
So basically just having a lot of conversation with your local lenders. A lot of times you can see historic averages, national averages online. Some lenders post their rates online, but rates actually move all day, every day. So think of the mortgage bond market very similar to like the stock market. You know, prices are moving up and down all day for stocks. Prices are moving up and down all day for mortgage rates. And so it's always a snapshot in time, and every situation is different. Your rate is going to depend on your personal circumstances, your credit score, your debt ratio, how much money you're borrowing. So the rate that you get might not be the same rate that your neighbor got because of different circumstances.
And when that buyer applies to get pre-qualified and they go through the process, the rate is quoted, but it doesn't lock in until when? You try and lock in.
Good question.
Ooh.
So there's a lot of different ways that can be handled. I like to make sure my clients know if we're talking about a fixed rate. Most often we are talking about a fixed rate in my world. But the rate is not locked in until you have a contract with a firm closing date, usually. And then it's the client's choice. Let's say the closing is 30 days out. They might want to wait and watch because maybe they think rates are going to get better, so they could potentially wait, 10 or 20 days into the process.
Well, you advise them too, like, well, maybe, we should wait, but I know it's their choice. But
that's right. It is definitely their choice, because once you lock, in most cases you lock. If you push the button today and you decide to lock your rate in and rates are better next week, there's no turning back. So it's kind of rolling the dice at, any given time.
Okay. Okay, so we talked about, which I had never heard this phrase, but I liked it, the 5 Ds, because people are always buying and selling regardless of the rates because of life circumstances. And I just thought this was cute, you all. So tell us what they are.
Okay, so the rates are what they are. We can't control those, but people are always going to buy and sell because life is happening. So we call them the Ds: death, divorce, diamonds, diapers, diplomas. There might be some other Ds we could throw in there.
Which is so true. I mean, so very true. I mean, I'm thinking of some that we've talked about in the office, Trevor, and regardless of what's happening, it's not just an upgrade or, for somebody's house, it's that there is a true circumstance, job change or whatever it may be that they need to sell.
Yep.
That's what I've got, 3 different sellers right now, and they're in those Ds.
Yes,
that's right.
Yeah. Okay, so the other thing we've talked about in preparation for the show is what is the difference in a pre-qualification letter and a pre-approval? And we as agents sometimes get this question where the seller is requiring one over the other. So talk us through it.
So lenders may use different words based on their different requirements. Typically, I would say a pre-qualification means I've talked to a client, I've probably pulled their credit, we may have talked about their income and assets, and I have basically said, okay, based on what you've told me, this is what you're pre-qualified for.
That's a pretty quick conversation.
Pretty quick. You could do that in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Pre-approval is a little more detailed, and obviously something that a seller and an agent may prefer a little, because it's more solid, it means more. It's got more gut to it, more muscle behind it, I guess. We're actually looking at documentation. So you've sent me your pay stubs, you've sent me your bank statements. A lot of times we run it through our automated underwriting systems to make sure we can get that approval, because sometimes, even though everything sounds great on paper, running it through the system that actually kind of tells us what we can do moving forward can be tricky, depending on the overall risk of the file.
And that automated process, do you actually have to send in the documents, or are you just kind of typing in their information?
Most of the time you're typing in the information to run it through the automated approval system.
Okay.
Sometimes a pre-approval, or some lenders may even call it a conditional approval. A step further might be when the underwriter has actually touched the file. So not just me digesting, putting the information in, but sometimes it means that an underwriter has actually reviewed that information, which means your approval might be even stronger.
Now, do you have typically most people that are pre-approved, they do end up getting pre-qualified? Or is it kind of a, ooh, sometimes they might not get pre-approved, they have to do a few more things, or dig deep for tax returns that are in way back or whatever? But does it happen?
Yeah, it does happen. I always tell people it's never a no, it might be a not today. And so that's one of our jobs as lenders in general, and we are very fortunate to have a lot of good local lenders here in Rocky Mount, but one of our jobs is to give them counsel, to have a consultation, to talk to them about their credit and things that might need to be improved, or talk about assets. Hey, we need to save this much money, or we need a longer, pay off some debt, or we need more time on the job because your pay might be different. So there are a lot of different circumstances that may impact why they're not hearing a yes today.
Okay. But Trevor, I am thinking of I was representing the seller, and we had the pre-approval letter, and we put it under contract, and then lo and behold, the contract ended up terminating. This was one in Red Oak, because they could never actually get qualified.
Oh, so
yes. They stated this, but there was some additional, and it wasn't with you. You weren't the lender, but yes, the buyer's agent. I assumed she had done everything, and she thought she had done everything too. But unfortunately, after a little more digging, we learned pretty quickly that the qualification wasn't going to come. So that was my first experience, and that was last year with the difference of one versus the other.
So do you typically give pre-qualified letters mostly?
I don't do a pre-qualifying letter. And I only give a pre-approval letter once I've seen the information. Like, you got to give me your pay stub, because especially you think about this online, especially if you get the online.
Maybe I said it backwards. Did I say it backwards right then?
I don't think so.
You did.
Okay.
Yeah, you did it right. I think you did.
Well, and I said, you probably don't do the pre-approval letter.
Okay.
You do the pre-qualified.
I do the pre-approval letter, not
You
pre-qual.
do pre-qual. Yeah, I was getting it back.
That's okay.
Okay.
So you think about online, especially, the information that you tell the computer, it's only as good as what you put in. Garbage in, garbage out, right? So a lot of people, and I know this is just the world we live in, people don't really know how much money they make. They think that they work 40 hours and they make $20 an hour. Well, a lot of times they work 38 hours. And 36 hours. They don't really get 40 hours. Maybe they have variable pay. We don't live in this world anymore where we deal with a lot of salaried employees. Most people are paid by the hour. And we're in a different environment, especially since COVID, where people have had a lot of job changes. So sometimes that history and how you're paid, do you get commission, do you get overtime, you get shift pay, we just really got to dig in. And sometimes if you go with the first run of what the client told you, it's not always accurate. And if you gave a pre-approval or pre-qual based on that and didn't really dig into the information, it can come back to bite you.
And I do remember the overtime really does kind of play an impact on this. I think overtime was a part of this conversation on the one I referenced from last year, because overtime doesn't necessarily count, right?
You have to have a history of it.
You have to have a history of it. Okay.
So 12 months, and I think about like companies. We have a lot of big companies here, and a lot of those companies have had significant overtime. So a $50,000 income, they might make 75 because of overtime. And we're seeing an environment where overtime is being cut out.
Right.
And historically, you made 70. This year to date is only 50. We're only going to be able to use the 50.
Right.
So we're going to have to average it, and still you have to have the likelihood of it continuing.
Okay.
Gosh, listening to Angie, it just makes you realize what a great consultation she is, and she really takes the whole package and helps clients every day, and it's such a teamwork too.
Yeah. So. The other thing you just referenced made me think of, Trevor and I were talking with you before about historically how long people stayed at homes versus today how long people are staying in their home. So talk to us about that kind of transition that you've seen on your side as well.
So I think for a while, the average time in a home was 5 to 7 years.
Yep.
That was probably, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. That was kind of the expected time in a home. And now it's more in that 8 to 10 year span. And I think a lot of things are driving that, of course, rates.
Yeah.
Also
that
age.
seems to be the one I hear about a lot.
Yes.
Is I feel so comfortable with what I have.
That's right.
Monthly payment. So.
The other thing I think would be like age. The average first-time home buyer age has gone up. So I think
What is it now?
I believe it's 38.
38. Wow.
But we're helping buyers.
That's right.
That
That's
are
right,
22
that's right,
and
that's
23
right.
and
Oh, yeah.
24.
They were 23. That's right.
So it doesn't mean you have to be 38 to buy a home. I think it's about when you're ready. And our conversation a lot is about payment.
But I also think
Absolutely.
with the 23-year-old and maybe the 38-year-old, heck, the 42-year-old, it is, there is a lot that goes into those preliminary conversations that you and other lenders I know are so helpful in guiding. If it's not a yes today, how do we get to the yes, and how long away is the yes
That's right.
to get there? So we just got our cue that it's time to go, but I could keep talking about this.
Yeah.
Trevor and I thank you so much for coming. Angie really does help us all the time. We love working with her. Obviously, we just had you back in 10 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever.
We've got a closing this week, I think, Angie. I'm on the seller side.
Oh, good.
Nice.
She's like, she can't even keep track of all.
But no, thanks so much for joining us. And Trevor and I, on our next show, we have Dean Tayez with the Rocky Mount Industrial Village. So we'll look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.